we just heard, the song that we just heard is beautiful. The refrain of that song is, I've offered myself at the feet of one who is fearless. And therefore, what fear I have of even of death. One of the ways in the Upanishads, the state of enlightenment is described, is the state of, it is described as the state of fearlessness. Because as long as there is even one other entity other than ourselves, that fear can never go. And we are totally fearless if there is no one else even existing to be afraid of. And that can happen only in that ultimate state when we see that everything is really one. And so normally we speak about a God-fearing soul in a very positive terms. And that's a good thing. To be God-fearing is nice. But there is a higher state than that. Because if you are God-fearing, if there is fear of God, because sometimes in texts, God does sit like some supreme judge who rewards those who are good, but also punishes those who are bad. Now, that kind of God is a little bit to be afraid of, because we are not always very perfect. And therefore, to be God-fearing means to always live out of fear that I don't do anything stupid which will make God angry. But one of the things we quickly learn in life is that where there is love, there is no fear. And so when our love reaches its perfection, and we have this complete love towards the divine, the fear will go away. And therefore, the state of fearlessness is also not simply from a philosophical standpoint, but even a bhakta or a devotee was completely surrendered to the divine also becomes fearless, because there is nothing to be afraid of, because the feet of the Lord, the presence of the divine is itself the source of all fearlessness. So what we will do today is kind of quickly go through some of the ideas we revised yesterday and then see some of the verses that lie ahead. We began by saying that the main teaching of Krishna was given in the second chapter, the nature of the self, the importance of purification of the heart, chitta shuddhi, in order to realize that self, and the importance of karma yoga to bring about that purity of the heart. And then the question that Arjuna had was this kind of a duality between knowledge and karma, that somehow knowledge of the divine seems to be a higher goal. And therefore, he asks Krishna, why are you asking me to do work, to do my duty, when in fact, I should be getting this highest knowledge? And what Krishna says in verse 3 is that both these paths are valid, the path of karma and the path of jnana, but it's not simply a matter of choice. We don't choose which path we want. It's actually the path that chooses us. In other words, we should take the path that is meant for us. And until our heart is completely purified, the path of karma is the right path for us. When the heart is purified, then karma drops away by itself. We don't have to worry about when I have to stop working. Sri Ramakrishna gives the example of how when a daughter-in-law in a traditional family always had lots of work to do, lots of household chores. In good old days, things have changed now, but in the olden days, yes, as a daughter-in-law goes home, there's a lot of tasks. But when she's now ready to give birth to a baby, and as she prepares for that motherhood, gradually other members of the family, mother-in-law and other members of the family will gradually reduce her workload because she now needs to be ready for the state of motherhood. And when the baby is born, then she just plays with the baby. Everyone else takes care of all other chores. And that's the example Ramakrishna gave to show that when this baby of enlightenment, the baby of spiritual perfection, we are ready to give birth to that baby of enlightenment, gradually work will reduce on its own. Because sometimes as Vedanta students, as devotees, we do have to worry or do sometimes think about how much should I work and how much time should I spend in spiritual practice. Now that kind of a dichotomy is not always very helpful, although in the beginning it does seem practical because we do make a distinction between the time we spend doing our japa, meditation, study, and the time we spend doing other things. But at some point, our life has to get unified. That if I'm a devotee not only when I'm in the temple, not only when I'm meditating, but also when I'm at my workplace, also when I go shopping, also when I go gardening. I am a devotee no matter what. That's how our life becomes undivided. Then, if I'm doing everything out of love for God, if I'm doing everything in an unselfish way, then I just keep on doing it. When my heart becomes pure, when I'm ready for that higher knowledge, I don't have to stop working. Work itself will drop off on its own. When Sri Ramakrishna went to do worship in the Kali temple in Dakshineshwar, he wasn't worried about, oh, I'm so much drawn to Mother Kali, and so now how much time should I spend doing my puja and how much time should I spend meditating? No, he was a very meticulous priest. All the duties that he had, he did very well, very systematically. But a time came in his life when his mind got so immersed in the divine, he wasn't able to do the worship in the way he was expected to. Not because he didn't want to do it, but that thing completely slipped away from him. He said he would go to pluck flowers for the puja, and then he suddenly had this vision, the mystical experience, that this entire planet is the altar of the divine, that the flowers in the garden are already present on the altar. And he said he could no longer pluck flowers. And so on. So these amazing experiences he had. So all the duties that he had as a priest in the Dakshineshwar temple slipped away on their own. And so that's the good way for us as devotees to be mindful of. That we keep on doing what is right, keep on doing what is good, keep on carrying out all of our duties. And this chapter will later on describe the dharma, the swadharma idea will come here. We will discuss it later. But keep on doing it in the spirit of karma yoga. And when the time is right, the circumstances around us will adjust themselves in such a way that the work will automatically get reduced when we are ready to immerse ourselves in the thought of the divine. So that's what Krishna says in verse 4. I'll read the verse and then briefly give a gist of it. Na karmanam anarambhat naishkarmyam purushoshnute nacha sanyasanadeva siddhim samadhigacchati. So we don't have to stop working in order to get knowledge. It's not that if I stop working, automatically knowledge will come. That work, I should do work until the work will reach the intended goal of purification of the heart. Then the work will slip away on its own and I'll be ready for that highest truth. And then in verse 5, he said what we mentioned yesterday, that we cannot live even for a moment without activity. So the choice is not between working and not working, but between doing the right kind of work and a wrong kind of work. From verse 9 through 16, we won't go through every verse individually, but there's a very important concept is introduced here. And the concept of yajna. Yajna often gets translated in English as the Vedic sacrifice. Now, the concept is ritually, the yajna often involved making oblations, making an offering. And the offering was always done in the Vedic period. There was no image worship. The offering was always done in fire. Fire was considered a kind of a male person for the gods. Because if we want to make offering to these celestial beings, who is going to carry them? And fire was the one who was going to carry them. And of course, if you have some valuable, precious things to be carried, there may be a fear. What if this male person kind of pockets some of those things? And so the first thing they did was to propitiate the male person. So oftentimes in many Vedic rituals, among the early offering, it's done to Agni itself. So first feed the carrier well. You feed the carrier well, and then you say, okay, now could you please take this to Indra, take this to Varuna, and so on. So then fire, when the ghee or the oblations which were made, and say Indraya Swaha, that means I'm offering it to Indra, Varunaya Swaha, I'm offering it to Varuna. Now these are, just because they are personalized names, it just feels as if there are some different people to whom this offering is being done. But as Swami Vivekananda points out, that all of these different names, all of these deities that are mentioned in the Vedas are only personifications of the powers of nature. Because as human beings saw around in the world, powerful forces, which we need, the force and the power that brings us rain, the waters, the grain, the agriculture, the food. So because the Vedic sages saw the entire universe as living, I mean, today we just see that just atoms and molecules, just a material world. But that's not how the Vedic sages saw it. They saw the entire creation as a living entity. And behind every one of these forces, they were able to see a Chaitanyamaya, a conscious being. So it's personifying these powers. So when these offerings are done, the idea is we make this offering to, for instance, Indra, who was seen as the god of rains, who brings us rain. And so you make this offering, it goes to Indra in some higher celestial world. Indra is happy, and Indra sends us rains. And then we are happy, and then we are grateful. We make more offerings to Indra, and Indra keeps on saying. And of course, nowadays, very few people make such offerings, and therefore there is climate change. Indra is saying, I'm not getting my offerings, and therefore I'll send the rain whenever I want it. Maybe I might send some more heat because these people are not living the way they're supposed to live. I'm just kidding. I don't know why it's happening, but it's clear we are not doing the things that we need to do. We are not living the way we need to live. And karma plays a role here, that if we don't do our part, then nature will not do its part. And that is the spirit behind yajna, that everything is cyclical. We see in life also, no matter how much we may think of ourselves as a self-made person, because some people pride themselves in thinking, oh, I've done everything with my own effort. Not true. The human baby after birth is among the most helpless creatures in the world. In fact, the young ones of animals and birds become independent much more quickly than a human baby does. We would not even have survived if after our birth, our parents or the other elders in the family had not taken care of us. So we have received whatever we are today. We have received so much, there is so much of sacrifice involved of people who raised us, who brought us up. Then when we became a little older, we went to school. There were the knowledge, education, information that our teachers gave, the friendship, the love, the understanding we got from our friends. all of these things we have received from the external world. And so when we love someone, when we help someone, we are not doing any favor to anyone. We have received so much help from others, and we are just passing it on through help. So when we love someone, we have received love, we give love. We receive friendship, we give friendship. Nature gives us food, water, the things we need for our own sustenance. And then we need to do something to protect nature. We need to return. We see that circular movement even in the events that are happening outside. We know that it's the rain that brings water down, and the same water then gets evaporated, goes up again, becomes clouds, and becomes a rain again. If we just look at what's happening within us and outside us, we will begin to see this very circular, cyclical nature of things. And that is yajna. Now, what these verses point out is that kind of a yajna, that kind of a circular activity is occurring in our own personal lives as well. Now, we don't have much choice. It's a cosmic activity, and we are just nobodies in that cosmic activity. We have to be a part of it. The only choice we have is, do I want to be a part of it willingly, or do I want to be forced to do it? And that's where everything comes to, because it's like, I mean, who is a selfish person? Who is a self-centered person? A person who says, I want everything from the world outside. I'll get everything, but I'm not going to give anything to anyone. And then what happens? Nature says, oh, if you don't give willingly, I'm going to snatch it from you. And of course, in the most ultimate sense, at the moment of death, there's nothing we can take with us. Nature says, however much we may have clinged to all the things, clutching them and saying, I'm not going to give it, ultimately nature says, give it. And so rather than having things snatched away from us, if we give willingly, since we have to give anything anyway, then we are participating consciously, joyfully in this yajna. And what the Gita tells us is that that is one of the ways in which karma yoga can be practiced. That not to believe that we are doing any favor to anyone in life. Whatever we give and whatever the other person receives, that person has received it as a result of their own karma. I'm only a messenger. I'm only a person who is carrying what they already had worked for. And so this ego that, oh, I'm the one who is helping, I'm the one who is giving, has no place in it. And so this idea of yajna is very powerful, very helpful. And so that is something that we can take a look at. Look at verse 16. Evam pravartitam chakram nanu vartayati hayaha aghayurindriya ramo mogham parthasa jivati. Hugh here follows not the wheel thus set revolving, living in sin and satisfied in the senses, he lives in vain. So this is what the verse points out, that if we refuse to participate in this cosmic chakra, in this cosmic yajna, in this cosmic sacrifice, then our life is in vain. In vain in the sense, we would not have gained anything in life. A lot of the things we feel we are gaining, if we think differently, are such short-time benefits, short-time gains. So it's like they say, I don't know, but I'm getting my analogy correct. I think it's something like winning a battle and losing the war. So sometimes we might kind of have these small victories, but ultimately we have lost, we have been defeated. So what we should be looking for are not these short-term gains, but a long-term gain. And looking in terms of long-term gain, what it means in the Gita perspective is, do not think only in terms of this little life. Because oftentimes all of our calculations are based on this life. And our life is something that is sandwiched between the time I was born till the time I die. But that's such a small fraction of my entire existence. So just as we, like if there is some long running serial on a TV serial, for instance, you just pick up at random any episode in the middle, say 63rd episode, and then you haven't seen the first 62, and you don't know what's going to come later on. That episode will make no sense. It's like, why is this person doing like this? Oh, this poor person, why is this person suffering? Why is this person being benefited? We have no idea because we don't know the earlier episodes, how the story has developed. So all of the decisions we make, all of the judgments we make based on this, our life between birth and death is like just taking this one episode of a long existence that we have had and trying to then determine what I should do. So if we take a long-term view, then we will see that rather than thinking about how I'll be benefited in short term, I will look at life in a much larger canvas. Look at verse 17. Yastva atmaratire vasyat atmatriptascha manavaha atmanye vachasantushtaha tasya karyam na vidyate. The last phrase is very important. Tasya karyam na vidyate. Such a person has no duty. We spoke yesterday about duty, that duties we all have. And so sometimes in the scriptures, they speak about two kinds of duties. Well, the word for duty oftentimes is dharma. Oftentimes dharma gets translated as religion, and that's one way it's possible to use that word. But oftentimes in the Gita, when the word dharma is used, it is mostly as dharma as duty. And therefore, every one of us has duties. So there are two kinds of duties, possible to divide all of our duties in two ways. One is called sadharana dharma, and the other is called vishesha dharma. Sadharana dharma means general duties, duties that are universal, duties that we all have. Vishesha dharma means specific, particular duties. Now, these generic duties, universal duties are to be good, to be honest, to be truthful, to be helpful. That applies to all. All, no matter to what age group they belong, what gender they belong, what culture they belong, we all have to be truthful, honest, unselfish, kind, loving. That's a universal law. Now, there are specific duties, vishesha dharmas. Now, those dharmas can be based on either the specific stage in life that we are in, or it could be the specific task that we are called upon to do. Now, the stage of life, basically in olden days, classical Vedic way of enumerating it, were really 4 stages. And many of you are probably familiar with them. So it's the brahmacharya, they call ashrama. The stages were called ashrama. Brahmacharya ashrama, grihastha ashrama, vanaprastha ashrama, and sannyasa ashrama, which means the first stage is a student stage. The second is the stage of a householder, a married stage. Third is the stage of retirement. And fourth is the stage of renunciation, of being a hermit. That's how this gradual progression of life was discussed or described in the Vedic period. Now, each of these stages had specific duties connected with it. The duties of a student is not exactly identical with the duties of a person who was to manage a family, take care of a family. The duties of one who is retired from active service is different from one who is busy in the active life. And the duties of one who is renounced all worldly concerns and devoted oneself entirely to the spiritual pursuit, such a person's duties are different. So duties can change based on the stages of life. Duties can change with regard to the specific task that we may have, the work that we have. Now, I'll just kind of jump a little bit to a later verse that will come. Let me see what the verse is. Just go to verse 35 of chapter 3. Shreyan swadharmo vigunaha paradharmat swanushthitat swadharme nidhanam shreyaha paradharmo bhayavahaha. Better is one's own dharma, though imperfect, than the dharma of another well performed. Better is death in one's own dharma. The dharma of another is fraught with fear. Now, this verse has often raised a lot of questions, and people have tried to explain it in different ways. And clearly, there could be many interpretations of this verse. But I think it's good to also see what this verse meant when this teaching was given. Because the idea of duty, the idea of swadharma, what is my duty? And this question really is at the heart of the dilemma of Arjuna. Because Arjuna's question was precisely this. At this moment, what is my duty? What is my swadharma? Should I go and fight and kill these people who are my own? Or should I give everything up and say, I don't care for this kingdom, and then go and renounce everything? So what is my duty at this moment? So very, very quickly, now, as much as possible, we are still products of the 20th and 21st century. But if you can now try to go back a little bit, and it's not easy to go back. I mean, the younger generation, the millennials amongst us, it's difficult for them to believe that there was a world without the cell phone, without even television. That the world existed. People lived happily. It's not, but now we have gotten so used to these things. We would think, well, if I don't have my phone near me, how am I going to survive? Without a television, what will I do the whole day? So let's go back several thousand years when this teaching was given. Now, in those days, most people, whenever they were born in a certain part of the planet, that's where they grew up, that's where they lived, that's where they started a family, that's where they grew old, and that's where they died. Maybe a very handful of maybe sailors and explorers kind of went about and explored some lands, but by and large, the society, before jet travel became easy, every society was pretty insulated. Every society, therefore, also had to be completely independent, in the sense that in any community, there is a religious need, spiritual need. So we will need priests who have studied ancient texts, who are able to do the rituals, able to do the worship. Every community will need some defenders in case there is an attack to protect the community. A community will need traders and agriculturists to grow food where the people can live and eat. And a community will also need labor to go and actually do the manual labor involved in sustaining that community. Now, in a small village, for instance, if there is, and then of course, think about it this way, there were no schools to go to. So the only way you could learn any skill was to learn it from somebody else, be an apprentice to someone. And usually that meant learning from the elders in your own family. And so if there is a village doctor and a Vaidya, as in Ayurveda they were called. Now that person has learned the art of medicine from his or her parents. And then when their children grow up, they pass on that trait to the children. And then it's passed on, because there were no schools to go to even to learn medicine. no school to go to learn carpentry, electrician. We know it all, sorry, no electrician, talking about Vedic period. So we needed all these different skills, and they were learned hereditarily. That's how these early centuries, the professions became hereditary because there was no other place to go to and learn. Also, let us say in a village there is just one doctor, and the doctor's son or daughter, they feel, oh, I'm not interested in medicine. I don't want to give this thing. I'm interested in art. I want to go and do painting. Now, the village that time, the community told this son or the daughter of that doctor, sorry, you can do your painting in free time, but you have to be a doctor. You have no choice. Your swadharma now is to learn the art, to learn the skill from your parents, and do it to serve the community. And when your children come, pass it on to them so that they will then serve their generation. So that is how swadharma was understood in the olden days. My duty is what is determined by where I am born, what skill I inherit, and what skill I pass on to the next generation. So actually, swadharma in those days was pretty easy. In fact, if you see in the second chapter, that's the argument Krishna gives. One of the arguments Krishna gives Arjuna is, you are a Kshatriya. You're born in a warrior caste. And so right now, your duty is to fight for justice. Do the right thing. Now, times have changed. Now, it's easy. If there is a shortage of workers, shortage of doctors, we can import them. If we can outsource the activity. And so, in a way, we have a lot more choices to do. We don't necessarily have to do exactly what our parents did. We can do where our heart takes us. Now, the problem is, how do you interpret this words then? What is my swadharma? Because if my swadharma is whatever I like doing, whatever skill I have, then everyone is doing their swadharma. Then what is the meaning of saying that better to die doing one's own dharma than to do someone else's dharma? So that gets tricky to decide then what is my dharma and what is not my dharma. And so that is one of the challenges of students who are in the 21st century studying the Gita and trying to understand some of these ancient concepts. Look at verse 19. Tasmat asaktas satatam karyam karma samachara asakto hyacharan karma paramapnoti purushaha. Therefore, do thou always perform actions which are obligatory without attachment. By performing action without attachment, one can attain to the highest. So this is the theme, a kind of a central theme in the practice of Karma Yoga. Do actions without attachment. Now, attachment is a tricky word. To do any action, an attachment or an identification is already kind of necessary or assumed, because all activities occur through either the body and the mind. And Krishna has told Arjuna, you are neither the body nor the mind. And you are simply the Atman. And the Atman doesn't do anything. And so if I'm the Atman, I cannot do anything. And yet, I cannot stop myself from doing things. I keep on doing things. In other words, although the doing is being, I know it sounds odd, although the doing is being done by the body and mind, the body and mind are able to do that doing because I, the Atman, has attached itself to the body and mind. And so even when the body is doing something, I feel I'm doing it. When the mind is experiencing something, I feel I'm experiencing it. So every action, an identification with the body and mind is almost assumed. It's like without that, nothing. Think about it this way. In deep sleep, we don't have any identification with the body and mind, and there is no activity in deep sleep. We cannot do anything at all. And therefore, the trick is, how can I be identified with the body and mind and yet be free from the problems of attachment? And there are basically, which we referred to briefly yesterday, was there are just two ways of doing it. One is just do things without calculating what you are going to gain out of it. Just do things because it is good to do good. Do what is right because it is right to do what is right. No other calculation should come. Or another way to do that would be, if there is a true love for the divine, then do everything as an offering to the divine. That if a bhakta truly believes that whatever knowledge, skill, energy that I have has come to me through God's grace, then the best thing I can do is to utilize my talents in the service of the divine. So I do everything as an offering to the divine. Now I keep on saying everything, but that everything it's assumed that everything is something ethical and moral. I cannot say I'm just going to go and kill somebody and make that as an offering to the divine. Some people try to do that, but would that kind of an offering would something that God would accept? What kind of a God I am praying to? What kind of a God I'm worshiping? And so whenever we say do everything as an offering, it's already assumed that we are talking about ethical, moral actions. So detachment can occur either when I do things in a detached way, as doing something that is good or right, without calculating my self-interest, or if I do it as an offering to God. Now look at verse 20. Because sometimes people speak about knowledge. Look at what Krishna says here. Karmanai vahisam siddhim asthita janakadayaha lokasangrahame vapi sampashyan kartumarhasi. Verily, by action alone, Janaka and others attained perfection. Also, simply with the view for the guidance of men, you should perform action. So, what is being said here is, do not think that doing action in the spirit of Karma Yoga is some kind of only a preliminary practice. What this verse says is that once I start doing work in a spirit of Karma Yoga and the heart becomes completely transparent, nothing much remains to be done after that, really. When the heart is completely transparent, all that the Guru has to say is, Tattvamasi, you are that. Or you read in the book, you are the infinite one. And if the heart is completely transparent, at once you experience, Aham Brahmasmi, I am the infinite one. Done. Nothing. So purity of the heart is like the 99.9% of the task. And so do not think of Karma Yoga as simply some kind of a preliminary practice, and then I'm going to do the real thing, jnana thing. It's actually nothing much after that. Right now, but again, as we said yesterday, it doesn't mean that I should not be thinking of jnana at all now. I should. It's good to study the Upanishads and so on, but recognize that whatever knowledge we get is directly proportional to the amount of purity we have. Because right now, the books keep on endlessly telling us, you are the infinite one, you are Brahman, you are this. And we are like, yeah, I'm Brahman. As long as we are reading it, it just feels good and we feel uplifted. And then we kind of go out into the street, or when you're driving, and then there is road rage and there is a red light and everyone forgets they are the Atman. And then we just kind of, again, we have become our human beings again. So, and the reason why that knowledge that I'm the infinite one doesn't stick, it's just so easy to forget, is because our hearts have not become pure yet. And what this verse points out is Janaka, some of the names that I mentioned are the other great ones. Just through this selfless activity, just through karma yoga, they attained the highest thing. In other words, you too, like them, can attain the highest through this practice of karma yoga. Look at verse 27. Prakriti kriyamanani gunai karmani sarvashah ahankara vimudhatma kartaham iti manyate. The gunas of Prakriti perform all action. With the understanding deluded by egoism, man thinks, I am the doer. The next word, 28. Tattvavittu mahabaho guna karma vibhagayoho guna guneshu vartante iti matvana sajjate. But one with true insight into the domain of guna and karma, knowing that gunas as senses merely rest on gunas as objects, does not become attached. So these two verses are important as well. It shows the role of gunas in why attachment comes and how attachment can be removed. Now, gunas are simply the attributes of every material entity. Prakriti has three gunas. We won't go into the details. All of you are familiar with it. Sattva, Rajas, and Tamas. Now, it is these gunas that bind us to material world. Now, if I can develop the insight, guna guneshu vartante, just the play of material particles with other material particles, if I can somehow remind myself of that as often as I can, that will help me in practicing detachment. For instance, now I'm holding this book in my hand and I'm reading it. And I, like any of us will say, I can say, I am reading this book. And which would seem to be a very honest, truthful statement. But then if I now look a little bit deeply, what does the statement mean? I am reading this book. What is this book? The book is, well, if you kind of go at the microcosmic level, with just atoms and molecules. It's just material particles. Material particles arranged in a certain way, and I call that group of material particles, I call it a book. And now, in order to read the book, I'm holding it in my hand. So now what is my hand? I look at my hand and say, well, this body is also made of material particles. And these atoms and molecules shaped in a certain way, I call these are my fingers, this is my palm, this is my hand, and then this hand is holding it. And then I say, I'm reading the book. Well, I'm using my eyes. Then there is the optic nerve. The message goes to the brain. All of the entities involved in this activity of holding the book, reading the book, understanding the contents, speaking it out, all of these things, whether there's a book, the hand, the eyes, the brain, all these are part of the material world. So if I'm able to somehow develop a different and not an X-ray vision, we can say a Vedanta vision, if you like, then if I'm holding this, all that I'm seeing is, oh, some material particles see the form of a book, some material particles in the form of the hand, some material particles in the form of the eye, some just material particles interacting with each other. And yet, the ultimate result is I say, I am reading the book. Where does this I come in? I'm not doing anything. I'm just witnessing these material particles interacting with each other. If I can remember that, and when I can remember that, that would be a practice in itself. So that would be a practice of detachment. Now, of course, we can't be, if we start doing it with every little thing throughout the day, we'll probably not be able to do anything. And so, at least on some time, even if you spend 5 minutes in the morning, 5 minutes in the evening, thinking about this idea, this concept, this way of looking things will go deeper and deeper inside our heart. So even when we are not consciously thinking about it this way, this perspective will remain at the back of our mind, even as we go about doing our other activities. And the more we do it, the more it kind of becomes the way our mind thinks, then detachment becomes easier. So this chapter gives us a lot of different clues, a lot of different ways of practicing karma yoga. And we have already seen several. And of course, today we saw how looking upon the entire activity in the external world and the activity with which we are connected as a part of this big cosmic sacrifice, a yajna. How looking at everything as just a play of gunas, play of these material particles. All these are different tools, different ways that can help us not get attached, not get identified with the material world, so that we can stand back and then we see, not just intellectually, then we begin to experience that our true reality is the Atman, something that Krishna describes so beautifully, so powerfully in the first part of the second chapter. So I will stop here now, and then we'll have a few minutes for your thoughts, comments, and questions.